Hi, everybody, and welcome to Fearless. This is a brand new podcast about strength, resilience, and rising anyway. One of the things that really got me thinking about doing a podcast was a quote that I kept hearing over and over again while we were going through our daughter's situation was, fear doesn't always show up loudly. Sometimes it lives quietly in the background of our lives. And I felt like we were continually being told, you guys are so strong. How are you handling this? How are you going through all of this? But when it really came down to it, everyone is carrying their own life, their own struggles, their own pain. And sometimes life can feel a little bit overwhelming. And so there's moments when we see other families going through things and we're like, oh my God, there's no way I could even handle that because I can barely handle what's in front of me right now. But the truth is, we never know how strong we're going to be until strength is the only path that we have to go on, because strength exists in all of us. So that's why I wanted to share these stories. I felt like there was enough being told up to and during the tragedies, and then it was kind of like these stories stopped and there was nothing else after that. How did these families adjust, get home, live life differently, love differently, when all of it is so different? So I wanted to create a podcast to tell those stories from kind of post-tragedy and on. What does that look like? Our fearless moment came about on August 12th, 2025. Our daughter Cadence was at golf practice and collapsed. What we thought was a heat-related situation quickly escalated into something so much more. We found out very quickly in the process that she had a massive brain bleed and that she was going to need to be airlifted to a major trauma hospital. So really, from the time the incident happened to the time that we were being airlifted was under an hour. And quite honestly, during that entire period, fear hadn't set in yet. That was not the feelings that I was having. Helplessness, absolutely, but a calmness with that helplessness. And it was a calm that I really can't fully understand or put into words because I wasn't really understanding it myself. I knew that she was in the best hands and everything was being done to kind of get her better and figure out what was going on. And I never once thought that it was the end. Like there wasn't ever a point where I thought, oh my God, she's going to die. My gut just would never get there. And so really that first night, I was just kind of left with handling what was being put in front of us. And because it was moving so quickly, I don't think it allowed me the chance to just kind of sit in those feelings and understand what was truly happening. That all changed the very next morning. The surgeon had taken her into surgery about 3 a.m. Pressure of her brain had gotten to a point where they had to do something. So they were going to cut a piece of her skull out to allow the brain to kind of expand a little bit. And so we were kind of left in her room just waiting to hear how the surgery went and what the next steps were. When the surgeon came in and explained to us how severe the brain bleed had been, he told us that during the surgery, he wasn't sure she was going to make it. And he's not very confident that she was going to make it through the day. That was the moment that fear really arrived. We were both kind of left sitting there questioning everything. And we were alone. So I can remember sitting in the back of the ICU room. It was super quiet. She hadn't been brought back yet. My husband and I were kind of left alone there to process what had just been told to us. And I just remember thinking, is this really the end of my daughter's life? Like, how do I even handle this information? What are we supposed to do with this information? And then there was a moment that my husband looked over at me and he grabbed my hand and he looked me in the eye and he said, I just need to know that you're going to continue to love me through all of this. And it was in that moment that I just allowed myself to break and have all those feelings that I'd been just kind of allowing to ping pong inside of me. And I just remember falling to the ground and crying, and all that fear, all that anxiety, all that pain just kind of poured out of me. And I stayed there for what felt like forever, just trying to process what was being told to me and what our next steps were. But then it was like a wave came over my entire body. Again, not something that I can explain, but it was a deep, steady knowing that this wasn't the end of her life. This couldn't be the end of her life. I knew that she was still alive. She was still with us. And that meant that we could take the next step. Even if it was just one, we were going to take it. So we really decided in that moment to live minute by minute, and hour by hour. When she finally got back to the room, there was a lot of commotion around her, tons of machines, tons of monitors, wires beeping, all this stuff going on as they're trying to reconnect her. And then it was as quickly as all of that happened, the room kind of emptied out and we were left with just us, her, and her nurse. And we really just watched every number, every breath that she took, and we lived for our neuro checks. Those happened every hour on the hour. They would come in, they would try to wake her and get her to answer some commands. And really all day long, we had little to no response. They were able to kind of stir her a little bit to where she would move, but nothing that was giving us that we were making any progress. But then nearly 12 hours after we were told that she may not survive, she gave us a thumbs up. And that single moment kind of changed everything for my husband and I. From that moment on, we decided that we didn't have to live moment by moment, but we could expand out to hour by hour and day by day. And we lived that way for 64 days in the hospital. Were there setbacks? Absolutely. Every single day, it felt like we were taking a step forward to take 3 steps back, 3 steps to the side. It just felt like once we got one situation under control, there was another situation that presented itself. We were constantly changing her care plan, moments that felt impossibly heavy, surgeries that didn't go as planned. There was all of that. All of it just kind of was revolving around this poor little child's body. But we chose intentionally to focus on what was going right. Naively, it was really the only way that I knew how to survive in that moment, the only way that my brain could kind of wrap its way around it. Looking back now, I realized that I wasn't fully seeing everything. I can look back at videos and pictures now and be like, oh my God, where was I when all of this was happening? I definitely didn't see the severity of the situation. I definitely didn't see the full trauma that she was going through. I was just really kind of focused on the small things that were going right. And maybe that was my brain's way of protecting me. I don't know, but it was really the only thing that I could do was focus on the good stuff and taking each step as it came to us. And really, a lot of that strength came from messages that I was getting. My inboxes were flooded with people saying that they were praying for us and thinking about us. But the most powerful ones came from families that had been through similar situations. And they were powerful because I was able to kind of see what life would look like on the other side of what we were dealing with at the current moment. So what felt impossible at the moment, I could see that there was light at the end of the tunnel. And that's really when it first kind of hit me that these stories aren't often told to fruition. They're kind of stopped after the tragedy happens. And I'm to blame for this as well. You know, we see this stuff pop up and we feel for the families and we follow the stories and we pray for them and we cheer them on. But once the crisis kind of passes and it kind of looks like things level out, we kind of move on to that next trauma, that next tragedy that we see. And what we don't often talk about is what happens after that. Like what happens when life has to resume and it's not normal like it was before, or when the shock fades, or when the real work begins, which is on the outside of that tragedy, because that's really where I believe truth lies and the stories that aren't often told. So this podcast really was started to tell those stories, talk about those moments, the stories of what comes after. So after the hospital, after the diagnosis, after the loss of a child or a husband or a wife, after your life has changed forever, how do you rebuild from that? How do you love differently from that point on? And what do you do to move forward when nothing looks the same as it did before? There's definitely this feeling of before and after that we don't talk about. And I feel like it's something that we should. So fear and pain looks different for everyone. Some people completely shut down. Some people break apart. Some people carry quietly, but there's something powerful in every response. And I really feel like there's something that we can learn from one another in all of this. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're carrying something heavy at the moment, I want you to know that the space was created with you in mind. You don't have to be fearless to be strong. You don't have to have the answers to keep going. Strength often looks like taking the next breath, the next step, and even when the path isn't clear, just continuing to walk forward. So thank you for trusting me with these stories. Thank you for being here at the very beginning. I hope you will find value in every single episode. The next episode, I really am going to talk about what happens when the fear doesn't disappear, when it starts to get louder. and how we walk alongside of that. So this is Fearless. It's a podcast about strength, resilience, and rising anyway. So until next time, stay strong.